My name is Ted Napolitano. I work for the VA at the SimLearn National Simulation Center in Orlando, Florida. Today, I want to talk about how to improve patient safety when opening newly built medical facilities. It turns out that there's a lot of factors that seem to impinge on one another when you open new facilities. There's new staff, new equipment, new services which create an environment of unintended hazardous conditions that are pretty hard to recognize. The approach we take to this problem is important because if we don't identify these latent hazards, the patients will find them for us, and they may be harmed or die. In their seminal book, To Err is Human, published in 2000 by the Institute of Medicine, the authors estimated that 98,000 people die each year from preventable medical errors. And in addition, more people die from medication mistakes than from workplace injuries. If you gather up all these costs together, plus the human tragedy experienced by the patient and family, you'd recognize that errors in our medical system should be ranking way up there at the top of our national concern. So what's happened to our medical system since 2000? Well, according to a May 3, 2016 report from Dr. McCary of Johns Hopkins, more than 250,000 patients die each year because of preventable medical errors. Dr. McCary cites examples such as surgical complications, dosage mix-ups, improper patient handoffs, and team communication errors. This leads medical errors to rank behind only heart disease and cancer as the third leading cause of death in the U.S. In 2013, the Journal of Patient Safety had investigated the issues of medical errors and discovered that the original report from the Institute of Medicine was based on data from 1984. By that time, it was already 3 decades old. The journal updated the review of literature, examining the period of time from 2008 to 2011, and then concluded we are now causing 400,000 deaths annually from preventable medical mistakes, or as they call them, adverse events. Additionally, they estimate that patients who are severely harmed are 20-fold more common than those who are experiencing lethal harm. That's 8 million more patients a year affected by medical mistakes. Their study identified many causes, including new guidelines made for physicians that just can't keep up with the advancements and the new equipment, or hospitals that are struggling with new hires, training costs, equipment upgrades, and teamwork communications issues resulting in poor handoffs. Some experts raised their eyebrows and challenged the journal's estimate. If we use the Institute of Medicine's estimate of deaths based on the 1984 data and assumed it remained constant throughout the years, then by 2016, you'll see the total is 3,234,000 people who died unnecessarily because of preventable medical mistakes in the hospitals. My business goal is improving patient safety when opening new medical facilities, and the target opportunity is enormous. The current construction budget for medical facilities in 2016 is $41.9 billion, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, and it keeps growing. The good news is we have new facilities to meet patient demand. The challenge is that with all the newness comes more chances for medical errors. Well, we've just talked about a lot of data, but what does it all mean to the patient? Well, here's how the patient sees it. With the current rate of mistakes, more hospitals means more chances for medical errors or hazards. We've already had over 3 million preventable deaths since 1984. And the death rate from errors in hospitals is over 400,000 per year, and serious harm occurs to over 8 million more patients. So, you may ask, what can we do to reduce hazards and errors in medical care? Well, at the VA, we are taking action on this, and let me show you what's going on. The VA is also modernizing and building new facilities. Simulern was asked to help each new hospital use simulation to get ready to see patients. We get involved very early in planning with the activation teams for each location. First, it was with the Las Vegas VA back in 2012, and they opened in 2013. By that time, we were involved with the Orlando VA, opening their veterans home, and then in 2015, we helped them open outpatient clinics, and now they're finishing with inpatient and the emergency department. Next are the New Orleans VA, which will open this December, and finally Denver, which will finish construction and open in 2018. Altogether, they represent over 5.5 million square feet of new clinical and inpatient space. The story of Simulern's support is not about using simulation for clinical training, but rather for tackling problems. You see, the same issues of struggling with new teams, the cost of training, and medical errors impact the new VA facilities just as in the private sector. But it is like the issues are on steroids when you're dealing with a whole hospital system. We discovered the big challenge leadership faces is that they have a brand new facility which no one has worked in, with brand new equipment that has never been operated to support a real medical situation, with a staff of doctors, nurses, technicians, administrators, and so forth who are unfamiliar with the new environment and new medical capabilities. Most of these people have never worked together before, or never worked for the VA, or have never worked in a hospital setting. With all the unknowns this brings together, we have a unique setting for things to go wrong in a way that there is no history to draw upon from other locations. And so we turned to high-fidelity simulations to help find hazards and defects in the systems before patients arrive. According to a study by Hertzer et al. From Johns Hopkins, one of the greatest challenges facing both practitioners and risk managers is this identification of previously unknown clinical hazards and defects. Hazards are defined as events that could harm patients. A defect is any clinical or operational occurrence that should not be repeated. The latent hazards may come from the new work locations, new services not offered before, new therapies replacing what we have done for years, new teams with mixtures of long-time VA staff, new hires, residents, and trainees, and from new state-of-the-art equipment, most of which few people are familiar with. Our goal is to identify and mitigate clinical hazards and defects in these new facilities. But instead of just targeting one or two clinics or an inpatient floor, we are applying our solution approach to the entire hospital in both clinical and non-clinical areas. We conduct simulations of patient care to identify hazards and defects associated with latent failure modes that are embedded in the system. We based our hospital activation simulation tool on work done by Hertzer and published in the Joint Commission Journal on Quality and Patient Safety in 2009. They discussed 3 major tests of a new framework of analysis and solutions at Johns Hopkins used to target these latent hazards. Well, as Hertzer wrote in that study, in situ simulation can facilitate the identification of previously unknown hazards and engage members of the patient care team. Our assessment team is formed from staff at VA's Simulern National Simulation Center in Orlando and is activated when a new facility reaches out for help in planning their opening. The model for our whole hospital approach is to conduct the simulations before patients arrive. This is not a personal performance or competency assessment. We are totally focused on discovering latent hazards in the planned workflow, patient flow, equipment, and emergency procedures. New hospitals open in phases, so we follow that schedule, working through various outpatient clinics and progressing to inpatient services and the wards. Simlearn uses a full project management model from analysis and planning to testing, implementation of mitigation processes, and evaluating the results. In the pre-assessment stage, we help the customer focus on real issues by asking questions like, "What about your new facility keeps you up at night?" The answers are sometimes surprising and get to the heart of the matter. The activation service spans a project timeline of 15 to 20 months, depending on the size and complexity of the medical facility. It begins with leadership calls and site visits, then pre-assessment meetings with the SMEs responsible for the operations in the new facility. The testing process repeats with each group of clinicians getting custom-tailored scenarios for their unique needs. Typically, the outpatient clinics are in the first phases, and then the inpatient and emergency services are scheduled at the end. Each scenario is developed by our clinical experts and based upon concerns voiced by the supervisors and SMEs we talk to. By treating the scenario as a real-world event held in their workplace, where we don't give them the script, we maintain improved believability, and that naturally draws the team into problem-solving mode as in real life. By conducting in-situ debriefings immediately afterwards, we are able to tap into the team's knowledge to collect suggestions for mitigation steps. For each department, we provide a written report of findings, identifying if it is related to equipment, patient flow, and/or workflow. Each finding is scored on a patient care improvement scale to show the severity, probability, and risk of the potential hazards. Recommended mitigation actions are also listed on the report. Now, our briefings to the leadership for phases that we complete and follow-up meetings on the status of mitigation are scheduled in the overall plan. The Patient Care Improvement Matrix is based on the Safety Assessment Code Matrix developed by the VA's National Center for Patient Safety. By scoring the opportunity level immediate to minor response versus the probability of occurrence, the matrix allows easy grouping of the latent hazards as needing immediate action, shown here in blue, or for further review to take appropriate action, or perhaps accepting the hazard exists after reviewing it. We have conducted hundreds of different scenarios since starting in Las Vegas, in hundreds of locations and situations, because each is uniquely crafted based on the pre-assessment steps with the unit supervisors and their SMEs. They range from just walking the path in the day of a patient to having a disaster emergency in the OR during an intense surgical procedure. Roughly 60% of our findings are related to equipment. It may be installed and plugged in, but not properly programmed. For instance, we found that when emergency code blue buttons were pushed, the automated overhead announcement read out a location label on the architectural drawing, instead of giving a hospital unit name, room, and floor number that a code team could relate to. In another case, the inpatient room headboards were installed, but the connections for the monitoring equipment did not transmit the readings to the nurse's station. Interdepartmental communication and coordination of procedures is another common finding area. Some departments may not have existed before the new hospital opened, like a blood bank, and details of how it would work together with other inpatient units was not fully coordinated, resulting in delays during the scenario when the doctor ordered blood for the patient. Equipment designed at a manufacturer may be focused on meeting safety standards, but may not have anticipated what could happen in a clinical setting. In one crisis simulation in a therapy area, pulling on the emergency stop cord shut everything off, including the rescue equipment, so the patient couldn't be saved. It's a good thing it was a mannequin. In a cardiac arrest scenario, a nurse ran to the hallway location for the AED box, only to find that the AED had never been installed, and later discovered what was in the warehouse had expired supplies. When a crash cart was brought to the scene of another emergency scenario, the team discovered that the various drugs were loaded in the wrong drawers. This caused the hospital to stop, establish a permanent standard for the carts, inventory check all the carts, and make adjustments to ensure proper placement of the medications and supplies in every drawer. What have been the results, the big wins for our hospital activation simulations? Well, first, there is recognition by the hospital leadership and staff that patient safety and staff safety have both been improved. As one chief of staff said about this safety aspect, we make sure to go through SimLearn's report to see that each area is a green go before we open the doors to the patients. Another win is that many patient care systems and staff procedures have been put through an intense stressing by simulations, often of high severity situations that are infrequent and not normally trained for, like trying to land an Airbus on the Hudson River. This is a huge benefit to the hospital of using simulation assessments. You can text extreme conditions, yet no patient or staff member is subjected to harm. Afterwards, the staff determines how to adjust their processes, improve team communications, interact with their own equipment, and mitigate the latent hazards they discovered. By making sure their procedures will safely handle the extreme cases, they have made it safer for the more normal day-to-day processes. Other benefits to the hospital include testing and improving the written procedures to help streamline processes and eliminate redundancy and waste. Often, our reports have provided sufficient evidence of latent hazards to have leadership postpone the opening of clinics that are clearly not ready for patients until the most serious issues are addressed and mitigated. This is how we make hospitals safer through simulations. In summary, hospital activation simulations help ensure a safer hospital for customers, allow teams to become far more familiar with processes and procedures in their new operational environment, address and reduce staff concerns about the challenges of a new hospital, lead to improved standardized practices throughout the facility, and develop better communication between and among the teams. My name is Ted Napolitano, and I've shown you how we can make whole hospitals safer through the use of simulations.